I think even Dave Harden had asked me, he's like, I didn't even know Primo could handle 3,000 frames. And I was like, honestly, it took me a couple days just to get this shot open. We had to like do a bunch of technical things just to get it to even play for us.
Ben has been nice enough to put a compilation together of his refs side by side with the final animation for the opening scene of Bad Guys. And we're going to look at that together, and he's going to, I guess, walk us through some of the ideas, some things that worked or didn't work, why he made the choices he made, and how he shot the reference. And I think it'll be really cool.
A number of people had asked me about how long it took. Like the biggest question seemed to be like how long it took and talking a little bit about the planning for it. So I don't know if we want to start there and
sure.
And
I remember you when we had talked a year and a half ago or whenever it was. I remember you telling me I'm on this shot that's like 3 minutes long or whatever it was. And then we spoke again months later, and you said, "Yeah, I'm still on that shot that's 3 minutes long."
yeah.
Understandably.
It's a long shot.
So how long did it take?
So just so everybody is clear, like I just animated Wolf for the first, I think it was about a little over 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And Min Hong, who's amazingly talented, he did Snake for this entire shot. And then we had a mix of crowd animators and I think a few other animators who helped us with the background characters that you see reacting behind the counter and on the other side of the restaurant, and helped us with the cars and that sort of thing. So,
okay. Brett, do you want to share it?
Sure. It took me about 4.5 months. It took Min and I about 4.5 months to animate our individual characters, and
wow.
It's a long time. I mean, it's a long time to work on the same thing, and definitely over the course of it, I'd work on one section, and then when I was kind of tired of that section, I would go work on another section. Thankfully, I was able to break it up. I think even Dave Harden had asked me, he's like, I didn't even know Primo could handle 3,000 frames. And I was like, honestly, it took me a couple days just to get this shot open. We had to like do a bunch of technical things just to get it to even play for us. But
were there chunks that you had to completely redo? Like by the time you're at the end of those months worth of stuff, do you go, oh, now the beginning doesn't seem to work as well, I'm going to go address that. Was there much redoing stuff in that time?
Thankfully, there wasn't. So okay. Maybe I'll talk about a little bit about the planning. So it started, towards the beginning of the film when I first got on. I know JP and Pierre wanted me to be the lead on Wolf, and so we started having conversations about different parts of the film and how Wolf will be. And at one point, JP, who was the head of animation on Bad Guys, he was like, "Hey, we're floating this idea that maybe we're going to start the film like a Quentin Tarantino film. Like, he's like, you remember Pulp Fiction where they're in the diner and they're just kind of talking to each other?" I was like, yeah, I remember that. And he goes, but I'm like, he's like, but the current way that they've sketched it up, he's like, it's a long, long shot. You know what I mean? He's like, we're trying to figure out how we want to do it. And JP we were also trying to schedule, what sequences I would supervise, because there are a lot of different moments with Wolf that I really, really wanted to animate in the film. Selfishly, I was like, oh, I want to be on that sequence. I want to help with this. And knowing that if I did something like this, it was going to take that much time. It was going to take 4 months of, out of my schedule in the film. But anyway, as we talked about it more, I was like, dude, this seems really cool. And it feels like kind of like a once in a lifetime sort of opportunity. So I'm like, I'm not sure I can pass this up. I think I really want to do it. So as we got closer to that point in production, we had a lot of meetings with Pierre and leadership and editorial to nail down the dialogue, because there was some different dialogue I think that were moving around, and the timings of things, and Min and I were both kind of like, listen, if we get into this shot, we only have so much time to do it. If we have to do big redos, it's not gonna work. You know what I mean? We're gonna have to try to nail this as much as we can. So we had a lot more back and forth, I think, than we would normally in terms of nailing down the dialogue and the timing of it. But once we got that down, we felt pretty good about it, and we're like, okay, I think this is gonna work. And we all kind of shook hands sort of and said like, okay, we're not gonna do redos for this. Like, we're all gonna like, just agree right now, this is our dialogue, this is what we're gonna do. And knowing that obviously, of course, that can change at any point. In fact, I think there was at one point, I could be wrong, I think at one point they thought about cutting this from the beginning of the film after it was done. And I was like, no, please, God, no. But thankfully it stayed in. I think there was for runtime. There were a lot of different reasons, but So thankfully, when Min and I got into this shot, we felt pretty confident that this was going to be the shot we were going to make, and the dialogue was going to stay. So
Right.
from there, sorry, were you going to ask a question?
No, I just said very cool.
Okay.
I want to let everybody know who's watching and waiting that we can't really, I don't think we're going to try to play this start to end with audio or anything, because
Right.
we might get copyright striked and shut down. So maybe Ben, you can like scrub to some places, talk about a few different choices or things that you want to bring
Sure.
up. That
Yeah,
important.
sorry about that. It's just not worth the risk because it's a live. So like if we get a strike, then they're just going to shut the whole stream down. So we're going to have to try to, walk very delicately. And we think that the lack of audio might help that a little bit.
Cool. Yeah. It's funny. I think, Jacob, we've talked about this before. Like, no matter how many times you've heard the audio in your shot, like, you can never remember what is actually said. Like,
what does he say again? Even though you've listened to it 1,000 times in a row over the past week.
So I don't know if I'll be able to remember exactly what he's saying in certain moments, but just one quick thing, because I remember someone had asked me about it, was, so once we got launched on the shot, we sat with Pierre and JP. We worked out, like, there's a bunch of things we had to work out, right? Like, first of all, how do you make a 2.5 minute long shot interesting? You know what I mean? Like, it's just two people sitting across a table for each other. So I think they sit at this table before they get up. It's over a minute long. So it's like, how do you make that engaging at all? And then also, what did we want to tell about the characters, since this is the intro, to the movie and to these characters? We wanted them to feel comfortable with each other. And it's like, how do we do that? How do we make them feel like they've been best friends forever? And then also, how do we make them feel comfortable in their environment? That they feel very relaxed where they are. And then how do we sort of indicate what's to come? Like, why have they been sitting at this table? Sort of thing. So basically what we did is I went off and shot, this was during the pandemic, obviously, and I went off and shot reference, and Min shot reference. And basically what you're seeing on the left side here, this especially, let me see if I'm going to mute on my side. So the reference you see on the left-hand side here, it was basically taken from one long take. I think I had shot this, I don't know, it was just me sitting at my desk playing the audio over and over, listening to the audio, thinking about the inflections, thinking about the moments, thinking about, how Wolf could move, and when he could play with the cup, or when he leans forward, like here, like when he leans forward on the table, when he leans back. So it maybe took me about an hour. I think I shot a bunch of takes in that hour, but there was pretty much one take that you see here on the left that I ended up really, really liking. And I felt like it was working for the most part. And I was able to show that to Pierre, and Pierre gave me a few little notes on it. And we can go into those little moments where things were adjusted. But I was just fortunate enough to get a take, at least for this beginning portion, that I really liked and that I could use for most of my acting beats. So you see, let's see here. So
I have a random question I want to interject with.
Go for it.
So you, like many others, especially at Dreamworks, I find I feel like I see more of this stuff coming out of Dreamworks, even though I know there are a lot of animators at Pixar doing the same thing, and Disney. But you seem very comfortable in front of the camera, and your reference video is very, very, very. It's very clear, and it's comical. It's got all the things. Did you ever take any time to learn any of this on the side, or is this just all coming naturally from just years of animating?
It's probably a mix. I mean, Jacob and I were working together, and especially when we were working with like Dave Pate and some other really incredible animators. There was this renewed like emphasis on believable acting and character specificity and making choices that feel believable to the character. And I learned a lot from a lot of different animators that I had worked with, and also just not just watching animated films, but watching live action films, watching great performances, and kind of dissecting like how those performances would make you feel. And then you kind of go back into those performances and figure out like, why did it make me, like, what did they do that made me feel that way? And
bad performances.
And bad performances,
figure out why it wasn't working.
Exactly. I know we had some, what is it, Man in the Mask, and there's that other Trolls film, but it wasn't like this Trolls, but it was like the live action Trolls.
Right.
You can learn just as much from how not to do it, as from good performances to learn how to do it. So I think and I had taken maybe a couple of acting courses. Dreamworks also offers like improv classes and different things. So they give us a lot of different resources to play around with. But for me, most of my learning, I think, has come from the artists that I've worked with, and also just from just trying to absorb this stuff as much as possible. Like watch as much, animation and live action and just good performances in general, and see like what is it about it that gives me that feeling. And I spend most of my time like in the animation process. I spend a huge chunk of my time upfront planning. And that's just me. So that's like either thumbnailing or a lot of times just shooting reference until I get it right, so that I have a clear idea going forward.
I mean, I just wanted to point. The reason I pointed it out is because when I look at your reference, it's like it's great, but also very notable. There's a lot that's been mined out of that reference. I see a lot of references are often, they kind of put you in the ballpark, and there's little teeny little bits and pieces, and the overall timing is there. But you're really grabbing a lot of really great little specific things that are happening here. Specificity being the word of the day. Naturally, I feel like I steal that word from Jacob because ever since he had that conversation with Andrew Gordon that one day, I just feel like specificity is like the perfect word to use, but there's just a lot of it. Like, I mean, anyways, I'll shut up, but I wanted to call it out because I think it's an important topic to discuss because you have the side-by-side comparison. It's not just a shot we're looking at. I think it's very interesting for people to soak up and realize how much of that was sorted out way before we even started moving character around, which I think is awesome.
Yeah. And Jacob, I mean, it was a big thanks to Jacob for, helping even articulate to me how important specificity was for character. No, it's true. It's like I miss our discussions. When we used to be in a cube together, we used to, you could just turn around and talk, and and a lot of times we were working on the same project, so we could really get in depth. But here, in terms of the acting, in animation, you can't really be spontaneous, but you can still be spontaneous when you're doing your reference. So you try to just move that spontaneity, earlier, in the process. And I just, shoot over and over and over and over and try different things. And I think another big part of it, especially when it comes to reference, and maybe this is what you were referencing, Brent, that was that trying to figure out what is it in my reference that gives me the feeling I'm looking for. You know what I mean? Is it the pose? Is it the timing? Is it the expression that I've got on? It could be any one or a combination of things, right? And so I think, when you see differences in the shot, like for instance, how much more Wolf leans across the table, again, just maybe create a little bit more of an interesting pose and a better line of action. And then different little accents, when he goes back, just kind of like there's certain parts where you're punching something up or you're adjusting the timing.
But then there's even really big, bold staging decisions that were being done in the reference. I love the decision to have him literally kick his feet up and like lounge in the bench. That was just, it was fresh and it just felt great. And like, was that something that you would like where in the process, do you remember when that came up? Or is that something that you had tried a bunch of things and just randomly you just decided to give it a shot and then you really liked it? Or this was something that was in the boards?
This is one of those interesting cases. I can't remember if this was in the boards. And also quickly, like, shout out to Mike Surrey, who I think had done the original boards and a number of ideas. I think especially the one where he's like air and he's like up, where he lifts up, I think was in Mike Surrey's original boards. So there's a lot of inspiration that you kind of grab from different places. You definitely no man is an island, when you're doing these sort of shots. But this in particular, so this is a good case where, again, trying to figure out how to make it interesting, right? Like over the course of the shot, I can't just have him sitting right across the table from Snake the whole time for like a minute and a half. It just felt like that was too static. And also there was this idea that you wanted Wolf to feel comfortable in his environment. So there's a part of me that was like, okay, cool. Maybe this is a good excuse for him to like, go to the other side and really like lounge out, in the couch. So it kind of had a dual function, which is something that I really like. Like I don't like to animate something or move something just for the sake of it. You want to have a reason for it or something that's a reason for it being in there, and so for this, we just decided, maybe he'd go to the, it was a challenging pose because he goes back into the table and he expresses, but then Snake comes across. We had to like cheat this eye angle because obviously like Snake is still looking like straight across, but Wolf, like it's hard to tell in this, but Wolf is actually sitting way back. So Min had to like, you can sort of see here, Min had to like pop out Snake's eye just a little bit. There's a little bit of an eye bulge just to get a clear read on the pupil and that sort of thing. And we tried to cheat Snake's face as much as we could, towards Wolf without losing, his silhouette or his expression. So this is definitely a cheat, but it's one of those where from the camera angle, it still works out. So there were little technical challenges like that. But the other part of the challenge was I had to get Wolf back to the other side of the table. Like he had to get back in front of Snake before he could get up. Because I think it was just going to be too awkward for him to go from this pose and then like awkwardly like slide his way like out of the chair to get up and go walk. Because, he's supposed to be a cool guy. He's like, he's like George Clooney, but there was this moment where he, teases Snake, right? Where he's like, wait, so you can taste air? He's like, what else you got? And he kind of like goes over to him and he gets in his face, because part of the conversation was Wolf is, since they're good friends, he loves to like goad him a bit and get a reaction out of Snake. So it was a nice opportunity that also felt motivated to get him out of that position and into this part of the seat.
That's cool. I want to point out, because you haven't brought it up yet, and I'm not sure that everybody is recognizing the extra challenge here. There's a whole nother layer to this that you didn't even mention. And that is that it's a choreography. There's a dance between two characters. And so you have to get the audience's eye over to Snake when necessary and back to Wolf when necessary. And so can you talk a little bit about what you're trying to do in those moments and how you work that dance out?
Yeah. So there were two things that I can talk about in regards to that. That was definitely something that was from early planning with Min, where we wanted to make sure that the moments when the other character is doing something, if at all possible, like try to keep them as still as you can. And thankfully with the bad guy style, we could keep them probably even stiller than maybe you would in a more naturalistic type of animation, where probably you'd still have a little bit of ambient motion or whatever. We very deliberately chose moments where, so Wolf says this and then stays there, right? He stays there in this. You can't see Snake, unfortunately, at the moment, but then Snake says his line. There is a little look over, so this is something I'll quickly add. I didn't have this in my reference where, let's see if I can frame through it, where Wolf looks over at the sugar and then reacts to what Snake said. And that was a note Pierre had about like trying to just show some thought or show some anticipation of what was going to happen next. Part of what we wanted to do was figure out how can we get these two characters to interact with each other, to not feel like one's isolated on one side of the booth and the other one's on the other side. You want them to feel like they're in the same world. And also what this passing of the sugar did was it showed that Wolf could anticipate Snake's needs. You know what I mean? Like Wolf could, like, he's so familiar with Snake. He knows that Snake is going to want sugar, or obviously a lot of sugar in this case, in his coffee. And just having the two characters, like Wolf lets go of it and then Snake immediately grabs it, just I feel like grounds them in the same world, better. And then again, to your point, Jacob, so after Wolf says this, he stops there, and then you see Wolf just stops and just stares at him. There's a little bit of a keep alive. And then you can see that there's like you said, there's a little bit of that bounce back and forth, right? Anytime Wolf is still like that, Snake is active and vice versa. So there is obviously a tiny bit of overlap because you need some thought process still going on, but it's minimal. It's usually more in the face. That's really cool.
Super well done. And when they are just being still, so you're watching the other character, you're putting enough liveliness in there, keep alive, like you said, so that if someone does happen to watch them when they're not supposed to be watching them, they're still living, they're still thinking, they're still alive, even though they're trying to hand off the torch to the other actor in the scene.
Yep, absolutely. And the different things we tried to add. Actually, I'll talk about this real quick. So when I shot this initial reference here, you can see how the reference splits into two. So the top was, I was still using the top reference from my main acting beats, like when things are going to land and when I want things to happen. But I needed to figure out the physicality of going back. Like, how could I make that smooth and cool? I love how, of course, when I was uploading this, I was like, right, people are going to see me in my pajamas. so there's that.
The socks are a nice touch.
Yeah, thanks. The bright red. I was so color coordinated. It was the pandemic. All right. Everybody was suffering. Everybody was hurting.
There's no judgment.
But this was one of those cases where you see in my reference here, initially, I had a much earlier timing, you know what I mean, for him to disengage from Snake and move. But to your point, Jacob, because I didn't know what Min was going to do, you can sort of see Snake up at the top there. I didn't know what Min was going to do in terms of going up high and sniffing, you know, the air and then coming back down and then saying nice. And there was a really cool expression that he had. I decided to keep Wolf a little bit more still for that whole moment rather than turning early. So to your point, like what you said earlier, like that's me adjusting the timing so that you really let that moment land for, you know, for Snake. But then here for this, I just didn't know how to do the mechanics of it, you know, in a believable way. So I had to shoot this a bunch of different times just to try to get like, because sometimes I'm smooth, but sometimes I'm really not smooth in my reference. So it's like you're gonna have to take like a bunch of different takes until you go like, all right, cool, like that feels good. There were little things that we tried to consider adding as well. So like Wolf has this, obviously he has a suit on. And whenever you're animating something, you're always interested in looking at props and like, what can I do with the props? You know what I mean, that I have. And with Wolf, he has his suit is an obvious thing that he can play with, right? And you see people all the time like adjusting their cuff links or adjusting their jacket. And you know, Wolf, we looked at a lot of inspiration from, George Clooney. So that's why a lot of times he'll have one hand in his pocket. Because if you ever watch Ocean's 11, I noticed George Clooney almost always has one hand in the pocket. It always looks cooler than just having both hands, you know, out, you know, sort of thing.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, not that he's like that all the time, but it's, you know, so I was trying to be cognizant of like, how can I use this prop, but I don't want to like overuse it. You know what I mean? I don't want him to be adjusting his jacket like all the time. So you can see in my reference, I had, you know, this moment where he kind of adjusts his jacket there. And then even on the reference on the bottom, he adjusted it there. I was like, maybe that's not worth it. You know, let him just kind of be there in that moment. And it made the pose read a little bit clearer. But then later I was like, okay, when he gets up from the booth, you know, then I think that's a justifiable time, you know, for him to like start adjusting. So he gets up, you know, quickly adjusts his jacket, because Wolf, part of his, even though he's kind of like Marty McFly. So like if he's ever caught in a certain situation, he'll be really expressive, or he won't seem as on top of things. You know, he'll be like reacting to stuff. But for the most part, you know, Wolf likes to put on this mask that he's the cool guy, right? Or that he's in charge, or he's the leader and he knows what he's doing. And so we added little things, like there's a shot I did where Wolf, right as they're about to go into the gala, he flips his ring and he's like, it's showtime. And as he flips the ring, he doesn't even look at the ring flip, right? He's looking at his guys, you know, and then he just catches it again without looking at the ring. It's just like a little, well, especially since Stranger Things came out. Steve Harrington, the character from Stranger Things, he was a big inspiration to us as well, where he's a character who does flourishy things. Like if you watch Stranger Things, Steve Harrington will do unnecessary actions because it's cool, or it's just part of his character. He loves to do these little flip, but they're totally unnecessary. So we would look for some of those things that maybe Wolf could do, because it was important for him to be flashy or to show like he was smooth or in charge. Again, this was kind of a nice moment here where Wolf pulls up his pants. It was kind of a fun. Here we go. Where he pulls up his pants. It was a nice thing where I could like ask CFX, like, hey, would you guys mind? Like, it was a little bit of a task for him, but I just thought it would be kind of fun. Again, making, you know, a lot of times these characters look perfect. Like they never change their costumes. Their costumes always look a certain way. And I'm like, any way that we can make it feel more organic, or like it's stuff that is on his body is adjustable and fixable. You know, we'd like to add those. We like to add those little things if we can, you know, in certain places. I'm trying to think of. Let's see. So this.
I just want to jump in really quickly, just to let chat know that we're coming up on the phase of this little conversation where if you have some questions for the big brains that are on the show today, it would be great for you to drop them in chat. Just don't forget to put a Q : before it, because it's a little easier for us to track it down in chat and then make sure that it gets asked. So just kind of giving everyone a bit of a warning that now's a good time to drop them, because we'll be coming back to those questions very soon. Sorry for the interruption.
No worries. There's one last thing I wanted to just quickly mention. There's obviously a lot of things we can talk about in terms of choices, but so here you can see originally I was going to have Wolf like open the door for Snake and let him out, but Min came up with this great idea about what if they both put their backs to the door, had a little moment together, and then they both left, you know, to go together, which I thought was great.
Cool.
So you can see I added that little bit of reference of myself pushing, the door open. So one other fun little tidbit, there's two things. There is a cheat where technically there is a cut here as this van goes by. And that was just from a technical standpoint. I don't want to take anything away from what we did, but there is technically a cut right here as this van goes by, because it helped us in terms of like CFX and other departments to be able to more easily manage these shots from a technical perspective. But one thing to note here is that there's a lot of distance here on the street and the plaza. There's a long, long distance here on the plaza. And we realized we didn't want to make the shot even longer. And it would be boring to just watch them walk this huge, long distance. So what we had to do was have this back and forth with layout where, like, how do we get them over there without making it feel like we've cut the shot? So I think it was Pierre, or it might have been Todd over in layout, who had this idea, like, why don't we pan up to the bank? So in this moment, you see the characters go away, and it's very hard to see, but the camera then speeds up really quickly, goes far forward, and then by the time it comes back down, we're much closer to the bank. And it was a way for us to, like, as the camera went up, we cheated everything forward so that
it's the R2D2 trick.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
By the way, quick shout out to the hilarious background character motion that's going on there.
So funny.
As they're showing up. Look at this one guy picking up another grown man and carrying him out of the shot. This is so perfect.
And then to watch the guy in the background, like, he sees them, and then, like, he just over like one frame dives off the off the chair in the back. There's so much great stuff. I mean, like, if people ever have a chance to frame through this shot, there's so much great stuff happening in the background. They put a lot of love and care into this, so it's great. Yeah. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else you could see. Obviously, I had like sped up my reference there and everything. What were you gonna say?
I was going to say, I'm almost wondering, and you may even actually know the answer to this question. Is this technically, have you broken a record? Was this shot the longest, like in a full length feature film, animated feature film? Was this possibly the longest cutlass shot?
So I was told that it was the longest shot in Dreamworks history.
Okay. In Dreamworks history, that's still hard.
But I don't know. I don't know if that's actually true. I think they maybe used it for marketing purposes, but but I know I believe Simon Otto did a really long shot. I think at the beginning of Spirit, there's this eagle that flies through the scene. That might be longer. I'm not quite sure. So I don't want to officially claim it, but but yeah, it's long enough. It's long enough.